Today, I am going to share with you a real story of my life. My name is Romy, and I live in Melbourne, Australia. I used to live in a remote area in the mountains where neighbors' houses were far apart. I didn't have any friends, so I spent most of my time playing alone. Perhaps that's why I was always shy and quiet since childhood. After my parents passed away in a road accident, my uncle and aunt raised me. I must have been only about 3 months old at the time. Before I was born, I had an older brother named Ricky. My parents loved Ricky dearly, perhaps more than any parent loves their firstborn. But one day when Ricky was 12 years old, he went to play in the forest behind our house and never returned. While my parents searched for him for months, they never found him. About a year later, I was born. My parents never found Ricky's body, so they always held on to hope that he might still be alive. I never saw my brother, but for some reason, I always felt a strange connection with him. My aunt and uncle used to say that. I often scared them with my actions because I would often talk to the dark corner of my room as if someone was standing there, even though there was no one. When they asked me who I was talking to, I would say, Ricky, I must have been about 4 years old, and I couldn't speak properly yet. I didn't even know I had an older brother who was no longer in this world. I was too young to understand, but one thing I was sure of was my bond with my brother. It felt like I had a thread connecting me to him. Maybe it was just my imagination, but I swear it wasn't. He was always around me, wandering. I still remember the first time I saw him. I was 6 years old, sitting behind my house drawing. When Ricky spoke to me for the first time, asking what I was drawing, he gently touched my head. Whenever he talked to me, he would always pat my head. I was drawing a forest with a rainbow. I was happy to show him my drawing and said, This is a forest. How has it come? I'll show you what a forest is like. Saying this, he took my hand and led me into the forest behind. His hand was as cold as ice. About 22 steps into the forest, he gave me a small shovel and said, Dig here. I started digging, and after a while, I found something buried in the ground. It was a bag, a school bag. Seeing the bag, Ricky smiled. I tried to pull the bag out, but it was too heavy, maybe because it was packed with something solid inside. I couldn't open it either because there was so much dirt inside the chain. It's okay. We'll open it later, Ricky said, and then I heard my aunt's voice from behind. She was looking for me. In a hurry, Ricky snatched the bag from me and buried it in the ground again. I ran to my aunt, who was worried, asking where I had gone. She scolded me for going alone into the forest. But I wasn't alone. I always had Ricky with me. When I turned back to look, I thought Ricky would still be there, but he wasn't. He had gone. My aunt grabbed my shoulder and took me back home, locking me in my room. You'll stay here now and never go into the forest alone again, she said before leaving. I didn't like that room at all. I was small then, but even then, I felt something strange in that room. I never felt like I was alone. I always felt like someone else was there. In one corner of that room was a wooden cupboard that I didn't like at all. It felt like someone was always watching me from inside that cupboard. Many times at night when I woke up, I would look straight towards that cupboard, thinking maybe I could see something inside, but there was never anyone. One day, as I was sitting on my bed and looking towards the wardrobe, Ricky suddenly came up behind me. I jumped in fear. Small sister scare me. And he, while patting my head, said, Don't be afraid. We all have to face our fears at some point. Slowly, he walked towards the wardrobe, opened it with a jerk, and signaled me to come. I got off the bed and stood in front of the wardrobe with him. Go inside, he said. Trembling, I closed my eyes and entered the wardrobe. I felt like he would come inside with me, but he didn't. As soon as I entered, he closed the door from outside. I was terrified, sitting alone inside the wardrobe, crying. Even though it was dark and silent, it felt like someone was watching me, like someone was there with me. I started banging on the wardrobe desperately. Suddenly, I noticed a strange noise coming from a part of the wardrobe I was kicking. It sounded hollow, like there was something behind it, not a wall. Then I heard my aunt's voice calling me for dinner. As soon as her voice came, the wardrobe door opened by itself, but Ricky wasn't there anymore. That night, I told my uncle about it, but he angrily told me to never mention Ricky's name again. After that, Ricky rarely came to me. But when I turned about 10, we had another conversation. This time, he took me to our house's storage house filled with old junk. There, he asked me to find something in the junk. After searching for a while, I found a newspaper with news about my brother's disappearance. A 12-year-old boy had suddenly disappeared from his home with only his school bag missing. His parents were not at home when he disappeared, and the police were trying to find him. I was surprised to see his photo in the newspaper. Ricky didn't say anything and just handed me the same old scarf that I found in the school bag that day. Was it yours? He asked. Without waiting for an answer, he held a hammer and asked me to open the part of the wardrobe where my brother's papers and photos were hidden. As I started hitting it, my hands trembled. The wardrobe I always feared now held a dark secret behind it. I kept hitting it until eventually the truth was revealed. There was my brother's body. He had died of hunger and thirst, trapped behind that wardrobe. When he was put there, he was alive, and no one other than my uncle and aunt were responsible. They were the ones who killed my brother, and now they wanted to kill me too. But before they could, with my brother's help, I uncovered their secret. As soon as everything was revealed, I ran to a teacher in our school who called the police. My uncle and aunt were arrested, and I was sent to live with my grandparents. I don't know why they killed my brother and wanted to kill me. Some say they practiced black magic and needed sacrifices for their own children. But whatever it was, they didn't succeed in their intentions. My brother saved my life. The last time I saw Ricky was that day. I still remember my brother and cry, saying, "I miss you, brother."